Hello, and welcome to yet another episode on writing clean codes. So, today we are going to be looking at the basics of writing clean codes. But first, if this is your first time on my YouTube channel, you're welcome. My name is Fabian. I do tutorials on writing clean codes basically. So, you are in the right place. Please subscribe and drop your comments. If there's any question, I will attend to them. Please note that for this tutorial, we'll be using PHP, but whatever we're doing here is applicable to other programming languages like Python, JavaScript, Java, etc. So if you love code, just stay tuned. So today, in order not to waste much time, as I said earlier, we'll be looking at the basics of writing clean code. So if you could look at my screen here, the first thing, I'm sure you all are familiar with what are variable names in programming. Variable names are basically containers that store information, basically. So a variable name is just a name that hold your storage position temporarily. It's a variable name, so it's variable. It's not constant. We're going to get into that too as we continue on this journey of writing clean codes. So your variable basically need to depict what the name you're giving it is doing. For example, if you have let's look at some bad examples and good examples. Basically, if I want to store a name, you should not come and say X, for example, or you should not come and write Y as a name. X does not make any meaning and Y does not make any meaning. So if I want to store John's name, I should be able to write it username. It's either a customer name or your first name. It should not just be a name. So if you look at this is a good example. And if you look at here, we have bad examples here as well. We have A is equals to 5 and B is equals to 10. But basically, if you write this code and run it, it is still wrong. But this is not what your A is not. It doesn't have any meaning. If someone looking at this, he will not understand what A stands for. But if you say A is width and B is height, they know what you're talking about. So if you look at here, this is a good example. And so does this. If you're looking at this, status is equals to 5. Status is equals to A. It's not a good example. Other status is equals to approve. Now, other status, you know that it's not just the status alone does not make a meaning. What does what is it a status of what? Is it a customer status or is it other status or whatsoever? So you must be detailed and very clear in your name variable names, and so does your method. They must make meaning so that if someone looking at your code, even if they don't know how to write codes, they can easily tell what the code is doing. So this is just the first example. You must be detailed on writing your variable names. You should not be too concerned that the variable names are too long. Of course, you can try to make it short where necessary, but as much as possible, try to be as detailed, and you should keep it very simple as possible. So the next thing we'll look at here is code formatting. Code formatting is another key area in writing clean code. What it does basically is that it makes your code looks very clean, and someone looking at your code will understand that yes, you are a professional. And this tells a lot when you are doing things like interview, when your members and your teammates are reviewing your code. It tells a lot on the kind of person you are, on the kind of software engineer you are. It tells on your professionalism. So if you don't know how to write code very well, but your code is clean, it's actually a very good culture. And as I always said, clean code is a craft. It's not something you just master once. It's something that will take time. So if you are looking at examples of bad code formatting, in as much as this code is on one line, you can say this is very nice. It's not a good code formatting because this code is going to be very hard to read. But if you look at this code, we break it down. This is here, and if you look at the function name and then echo hello, this is going to be very easy for someone to read. But if you leave it like this, it's going to be much more difficult to read, and this is not the standard. You understand? And if you could look at this should not be here. This closing bracket should not be here, but should be at the end. If you look at this good example, it should be here. And if you're writing a conditional statement, this is how you should close. But there should be space here, like this. So if you want to format your code, basically you can right click on the code if you are using VS Code, and you can basically format a particular session. If I do this, you see that the code is formatted properly, and I can also format the entire doc. So these are the basics, and these are the things you should put in place. They are basically a lot of what did we call it, a lot of things you can install VS Code that can actually help you make your code more beautiful, but we'll get into that as we go on. So let's look at what your function should do. Basically, this is basics. All those things I'm mentioning, as I said, we're still going to go into details, but this is the very basics of writing clean codes. But it's very important. Even if you have been writing code before, it's key that you pay attention and you stay subscribed, so that I'll be dropping more of those tips and you will continue to follow up. And if there's any challenge, you can always hit me up. So if you look at example of a bad method here, this particular method is doing more than this particular method is processing data and is sending emails. So it's performing more than one task. So these are the things your method should not do. Your method should not be too long. Like this is basically too much. And if you can look at what we have here for a good example, we'll break this method into two methods so that we can individually use these methods in different places without altering any change from the code. So these are the things you should not do. So this is also an example of writing clean code. And then the next thing we'll be looking at here is your comments. Your comments are very key. Your code is very important that you don't actually write much comment on your. I don't actually encourage it. Your code should be well detailed enough to tell. It should be simple, and you should not repeat a lot of things. So you should not have to comment necessarily. But in a situation where you have to comment, you should be telling why and not the what the code is doing, because the code should already tell what. But if you look at an example here, we're adding two results, and if you look at this is saying add variables. This is adding variables, but of course, what are the variables for? So if you look at it, calculate the sum of A and B. So this is a very good comment. What this is doing is calculating the sum of this and this. But of course, looking at this, you should be able to understand it, and this comment shouldn't be necessary. And if you come here, we have what this thing is doing here. We're trying to validate data. Validate what kind of data? If you look at the good example, check if input data is valid before processing. So this is telling you exactly what the code is doing, so that you will not have front and back with your teammate trying to ask the reasons why you are doing this and why you are doing that. All right. So moving forward, we'll be looking at the certain magic numbers you should avoid. That is, for example, I define this in a constant and I'm going to use it in multiple places. Of course, this should be defined in a particular place, not necessarily in the same file, so that you can as well use it in multiple places. But you should not just come and put a number like we do here. This is a bad practice. You should define it either in a variable or a constant, so that you can as well use it in multiple places. And if you know that it's not going to change, then it's very important that it should be a constant. For example, tax rate. So if you look at the second example here, this is also just on a line, which is, you should not store a number like this, but you should first store it in either a variable or a constant. And if it's not going to change, you should store it in a constant, just like I did here, and use it so you can actually use it in multiple places too. So you should not just use numbers like this. It's very, very key. So the final thing we are going to be looking at in this session is how you should handle errors, basically. So we have, as usual, we have some bad examples and we have some good examples. So if you look at what we have here, we are checking this number and then we'll process. So if you look at what we have down here, we first check for the good side, and then the else is in the last part. But this is not actually very good. You should handle the sad part of the code should go first before you execute. That is, you should handle errors first before you go to the right side of the code. So before the code will execute, it should check for the unexpected scenarios before it will now execute. So these are some of the basic things that you should consider while writing clean code. So as I said earlier, this is just the basics, the beginning that you should consider. Most of those topics will still be going in details and trying to explain why you should go about using them. So stay subscribed, and if you have any issue, as I always said, you can just drop it in the comment section and I will be attending to you. Alright, so that's it for this guy, guys. We look forward to the next episode. So have a nice day.